So many comments like this on this video asking for examples of my boundaries and consequences. I will share them with you, but there's two things that you have to remember. Boundaries are so personal. They have to come from your truth and reflect who you are and what you value. If they don't come from that energy, meaning if you're not prepared to follow through on the consequences to your boundaries, then it's just manipulation and issuing threats, which is an abuse tactic. Second, if you are in any way, shape, or form concerned about your physical safety, do not set boundaries. Instead, reach out to a local DV shelter so that they can help you make a safety exit plan. Safety first, always. So here we go. The best emotional boundary that I set for myself was to no longer people please. This means I was no longer going to take responsibility or accept blame for my partner's thoughts, feelings, or behaviors. I was not going to change my behavior and tiptoe around his big feelings so he didn't get upset. Whenever he had a thought, feeling, or abusive behavior, I handed the responsibility of it right back to him. And here's some examples of how I did that. When he would have a thought that was based off of a logical fallacy or a cognitive distortion, and he would communicate his thoughts with you statements that issue blame, either telling me my intent or telling me how I feel, then I would repeat back to him, the story you're telling yourself is. This handed the responsibility of his thoughts right back to him. I am not responsible for anybody's illogical thoughts, and I do not accept blame if they are incorrect. I will help you work through your illogical thoughts, but I will not take responsibility for them. When he was giving me the silent treatment, I would ignore him. I would continue on with my day and my activities and refuse to engage in this childish behavior. In communication, when my ex engaged in verbal abuse in an attempt to diminish my power, name-calling, yelling, swearing, put-downs, and passive-aggressive comments, I would communicate that I feel disrespected in this moment and that I would be removing myself from the conversation until he was able to communicate in a respectful way. And I followed through every single time. This would usually lead to him getting more upset, and he would break out the intimidation tactics, following me around the house, rushing at me, or slamming things around. Sometimes he would flip to the silent treatment. When he would start these tactics, I would communicate that I can see that he's upset and it's okay, but that I feel uncomfortable being around him when he's behaving like this. So I would be removing myself from the house for the rest of the day to give him some space, which would then prompt the manipulation tactics. Blame shifting, changing the narrative, and guilt trips. You don't love me. You're running away from our problems. You're being abusive. To which I would calmly and assertively say that that wasn't my truth, that's not what I was doing, and that I see things differently. I would once again communicate that when he is ready to have an adult conversation, take responsibility for his own thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, then I would be 100% willing to participate in a conversation. But until that point, I'm not available. My ex was financially abusive. He was never able to pay his share of the bills despite multiple attempts at revising the contribution budget. One of the bills that we had was a repayment of a loan to his parents. So whenever he didn't contribute his share of the bills, this was the first bill that I chose to skip paying. They would eventually reach out to him and ask why it wasn't paid, forcing him to take responsibility and explain why it wasn't paid. He abused me regularly with male privilege. He failed to participate in domestic duties around the house and childcare because deep down he believed that that was women's work. I didn't agree to this prior to moving in together. And despite my many requests for help, he failed to do his share. So I set boundaries around what I would and would no longer be doing around the house, which did include specific tasks for his children. Just because you have a woman in the house doesn't mean it absolves you of your parental responsibilities. These are just a few examples. If you need help with boundaries, I have a new series called Finding Limits that I'll tag in this video. I also have a 28-page workbook on my website that pairs perfectly with the series. It will take you through my 5-step process on how to set healthy boundaries. I'm going to give away 20 copies of this book to the first 20 people who hit me in my DMs. Send me a message and we'll get it set up.